June 24, 1944, 150 miles southwest of Kagoshima, Japan. Lieutenant Commander Richard O'Kane pressed his eye against the periscope in the control room of USS Tang, watching a sight that made his blood run cold with calculated excitement. 6 massive cargo ships, protected by 16 escort vessels, the largest Japanese convoy he had encountered in 3 war patrols. Through the periscope, O'Kane saw the merchant ships laden with troops, supplies, and equipment desperately needed for Japan's crumbling Pacific defenses. Behind him, his crew waited in tense silence. They had been stalking this convoy for 4 hours, positioning Tang for the perfect attack. The submarine carried 24 torpedoes, each one a 3,000-pound weapon with a warhead capable of breaking a ship in half. O'Kane's mind raced through calculations. Angle, speed, distance, depth. He had learned submarine warfare under Commander Dudley Morton aboard USS Wahoo, where audacity and precision combined to create the most feared submarine commander in the Pacific. Now, as captain of Tang, O'Kane was proving he had surpassed even his legendary mentor. What the Japanese Navy did not know, what their intelligence had failed to grasp despite mounting evidence, was that American submarine warfare had evolved into something their naval doctrine could not counter. The boats were better, the torpedoes finally worked after years of catastrophic failures, and commanders like O'Kane had developed tactics that turned submarines from lone hunters into convoy destroyers. The mathematics of Japan's defeat were being written not in surface battles, but in the dark depths where silent predators stalked their prey. Tang's journey to this moment had begun 9 months earlier at Mare Island Naval Shipyard in Vallejo, California. Her keel was laid on January 15, 1943, as America's industrial machine churned out submarines at a pace that would have seemed impossible just 2 years before. By August 17th, she slid into the water, a Balao-class submarine measuring 311 feet 10 inches in length, displacing 1,526 tons surfaced and 2,424 tons submerged. The Balao class represented the cutting edge of American submarine design. Stronger hulls using high tensile steel allowed them to dive to 438 feet, far deeper than earlier boats. This depth capability gave commanders like O'Kane a critical advantage. When Japanese destroyers dropped depth charges, Balao-class submarines could dive below the effective range of most weapons. Earlier fleet submarines were limited to 300 feet, leaving them vulnerable to determined escorts. 10 21-inch torpedo tubes, 6 forward and 4 aft, gave them devastating firepower. The forward tubes were arranged in 2 tiers, 3 upper and 3 lower, allowing rapid salvo firing. The after tubes could engage targets during escape maneuvers, turning retreat into attack. Each torpedo weighed 3,154 pounds and carried a 575-pound warhead of Torpex explosive. They could reach targets at ranges exceeding 6,000 yards. The submarine carried 24 torpedoes total, enough for multiple attacks before returning to base. Diesel-electric propulsion provided a surface speed of 20.25 knots and submerged speed of 8.75 knots. 4 diesel engines powered the boat on the surface, while simultaneously charging massive batteries. Submerged, electric motors drew power from these batteries, allowing silent running at slow speeds for up to 48 hours. This dual propulsion system gave submarines tactical flexibility. They could race ahead of convoys on the surface, dive to avoid detection, attack submerged using silent electric power, then surface to escape at high speed. Most importantly, Balao-class submarines could patrol for 75 days without refueling. This endurance gave them the range to reach Japanese home waters from Pearl Harbor, patrol for weeks, and return safely. A cruising range of 11,000 miles at 10 knots surfaced meant submarines could operate anywhere in the Pacific. They carried provisions for 90 days, enough food and supplies to sustain 87 men through extended patrols in hostile waters. This combination of range, firepower, and endurance made them the perfect weapon for strangling Japan's maritime supply lines. On October 15, 1943, Tang was commissioned with Lieutenant Commander Richard Hetherington O'Kane in command. O'Kane was 32 years old, a graduate of the Naval Academy class of 1934. He had spent the previous year as executive officer aboard USS Wahoo under Morton, participating in 5 war patrols that sank 20 ships. When Morton took Wahoo on her 6th patrol in October 1943, O'Kane was already preparing Tang for commissioning. Just 4 days before Tang entered service, Wahoo was sunk with all hands in the La Perouse Strait. Morton's death devastated O'Kane, but it also cemented his determination to continue his mentor's aggressive tactics. The difference between O'Kane and Morton was one of calculation. Morton was pure aggression, charging into convoys with reckless courage. O'Kane combined that same boldness with mathematical precision. He drilled his crew relentlessly on periscope recognition, range estimation, and tactical coordination. He developed new methods for night surface attacks, understanding that Tang's low profile and dark paint made her nearly invisible on moonless nights. He practiced drifting instead of running engines, which allowed Tang to remain silent while tracking convoys. Every innovation was designed to increase the odds of success while reducing the risk of detection. By January 8, 1944, Tang had completed her shakedown cruise and training exercises. She arrived at Pearl Harbor ready for combat. The Pacific Submarine Force had finally overcome the catastrophic torpedo failures that had plagued operations since the war's beginning. This triumph over bureaucratic resistance and flawed design represented one of the most important developments of the Pacific War. The Mark 14 torpedo had suffered from 3 separate defects that combined to make it nearly useless in combat. First, the depth control mechanism was miscalibrated, causing torpedoes to run 10 feet deeper than set. Submarine commanders aimed at a ship's waterline, only to have torpedoes pass harmlessly beneath the target's keel. Second, the contact exploder often failed to detonate on impact. Torpedoes would strike a ship's hull and bounce off without exploding or break apart from the impact. Third, the magnetic influence exploder was supposed to detonate beneath a ship's keel, breaking its back, but instead exploded prematurely or not at all due to variations in Earth's magnetic field. These problems plagued American submarines from December 1941 through September 1943. Submarine commanders fired spreads of torpedoes at perfect angles, watched them hit targets, and saw nothing happen. Ships steamed away unharmed while submarines dove to avoid counterattacks. Patrol after patrol returned with reports of torpedo failures. The Bureau of Ordnance, responsible for torpedo development, insisted the weapons were perfect and blamed submarine crews for poor shooting. This denial persisted despite overwhelming evidence from combat reports. Admiral Charles Lockwood, Commander Submarines Pacific, finally forced the issue by conducting systematic tests. Submarines fired torpedoes at nets suspended at measured depths, proving the depth control problem. They fired at cliffs to test contact exploders, demonstrating failure rates exceeding 70%. These tests, conducted in mid-1943, forced the Bureau of Ordnance to acknowledge the defects and implement fixes. By late 1943, the depth control was corrected, contact exploders were redesigned, and magnetic exploders were deactivated. For the first time since the war began, American submarines possessed reliable weapons. This transformation revolutionized submarine warfare. In 1942, submarines achieved minimal success despite conducting hundreds of attacks. In 1943, with partially fixed torpedoes, sinking rates improved but remained inconsistent. In 1944, with fully functional weapons, American submarines became the most lethal anti-shipping force in history. Tang entered service at exactly the right moment, equipped with working torpedoes and commanded by an aggressive officer trained in the new tactics. The combination would prove devastating. Tang departed Pearl Harbor on January 22, 1944, for her first war patrol in the Caroline and Mariana Islands. The first test came on February 17th. Tang tracked a convoy of 2 freighters, escorted by 5 smaller vessels. As she closed for attack, an escort suddenly appeared at 7,000 yards and closing fast. O'Kane ordered Tang deep. 5 depth charges exploded nearby, rattling the hull but causing no damage. When the escort departed, Tang returned to periscope depth and resumed the attack. At 1,500 yards range, O'Kane fired a spread of 4 torpedoes. 3 struck the freighter Gyoten Maru amidships. The 6,800-ton ship sank by the stern in minutes. 5 days later, Tang caught another convoy in darkness. O'Kane maneuvered Tang to within 1,500 yards and fired a perfect spread. The torpedoes slammed into Fukuyama Maru, tearing the ship apart in a series of explosions. Tang shadowed the convoy for another 2 hours before striking again, firing 4 torpedoes at the Yamashimo Maru. The ship disintegrated in a massive explosion that lit up the night sky. Survivors later reported that the ship's cargo of ammunition had detonated, magnifying the torpedo damage. By the end of her first patrol, Tang had fired all 24 torpedoes and scored hits on 16 of them. She was credited with sinking 5 ships, totaling approximately 18,000 tons. The Navy awarded her crew the Submarine Combat Patrol insignia, a distinction earned only by submarines that sank at least one enemy vessel. O'Kane received his first Navy Cross. Tang's second patrol began on March 16, 1944, operating around the Palau Islands, Davao Gulf, and the approaches to Truk. She made 5 surface contacts but had no opportunity to attack. Instead, Tang was assigned lifeguard duty near Truk during American carrier strikes on the heavily fortified Japanese base. This mission would prove as important as any combat patrol. On April 29, 1944, American carrier aircraft pounded Truk in massive raids. Dozens of planes were shot down, their crews parachuting into the lagoon or open ocean. Tang positioned herself near the atoll to rescue downed aviators. Over the next 3 days, O'Kane and his crew pulled 22 airmen from the water, including 9 rescued by a Vorto S-2U Kingfisher floatplane that landed inside Truk Lagoon to recover them. The Kingfisher, overloaded with survivors, could not take off again. Tang surfaced nearby, took the pilots aboard, and watched as the empty floatplane was destroyed to prevent capture. The rescue operation set a record and earned Tang's crew a Presidential Unit citation. More importantly, it demonstrated O'Kane's willingness to risk his boat and crew for missions beyond pure destruction. The 22 pilots returned to Pearl Harbor aboard Tang, their lives saved by submariners' courage. Tang returned to base on May 15th, having fired no torpedoes but having performed one of the war's most dramatic rescue operations. Tang's third war patrol would prove to be the most devastating single submarine deployment ever conducted against Japanese shipping during World War II. O'Kane requested assignment to the East China Sea and Yellow Sea, waters that brought submarines dangerously close to Japanese-controlled territory, but offered rich hunting grounds for convoys moving between Japan and the Asian mainland. Tang departed Pearl Harbor on June 8, 1944, loaded with 24 Mark 18 electric torpedoes. These newer weapons ran on battery power instead of compressed air, making them weightless and nearly impossible for lookouts to track back to their source. The Yellow Sea in summer 1944 was a shooting gallery for American submarines. Japan's merchant fleet, already savaged by 2 years of submarine attacks, was forced to concentrate shipping into larger convoys with more escorts. This defensive measure actually made convoys more visible to submarines equipped with radar and easier to track once located. The Japanese Navy, obsessed with offensive operations and battleship combat, had failed to develop adequate anti-submarine warfare doctrine. Escort vessels were few, poorly equipped, and commanded by officers whose training emphasized surface combat over convoy protection. Japan's failure in anti-submarine warfare was puzzling for an island nation that depended entirely on maritime transportation. Britain, facing a similar submarine threat in the Atlantic, devoted enormous resources to convoy protection, developed sophisticated tactics, and built hundreds of escort vessels. Japan did none of this. The Imperial Japanese Navy viewed submarines as fleet scouts and convoy protection as a defensive, unglamorous mission unworthy of top officers and new equipment. This cultural bias, combined with the Navy's fixation on decisive surface battles, left merchant shipping catastrophically vulnerable. The Grand Escort Command, Japan's belated attempt to organize convoy protection, was not established until November 1943. Even then, it received mostly obsolete destroyers, poorly trained crews, and minimal resources. Planners requested 360 anti-submarine frigates but received only 40. These vessels lacked modern sonar, possessed only primitive depth charges, and operated without air support or coordinated tactics. American submarines equipped with radar could detect convoys at night from 15 miles away. Japanese escorts equipped with outdated listening devices could detect submarines only at ranges under 2,000 yards, usually too late to prevent attacks. Furthermore, Japanese anti-submarine doctrine emphasized aggressive counterattacks rather than convoy protection. Escorts would chase submarines after attacks instead of remaining with the convoy. This left merchant ships vulnerable to follow-up attacks by other submarines in BKOT, the area. American submarine commanders learned to exploit this weakness. One submarine would attack, drawing away escorts, while others moved in to finish the convoy. Tang operated independently, but her tactics assumed Japanese escorts would chase her after attacks, leaving the damaged convoy exposed. Japanese merchant ship construction could not replace losses. American submarines in 1944 sank ships faster than Japanese shipyards could build them. Japan's annual shipbuilding capacity was approximately 1 million tons. American submarines were sinking over 2 million tons annually. The mathematics were brutal. Every month, Japan's merchant fleet shrank. By mid-1944, critical raw materials, oil, and food could not reach Japanese factories and cities in sufficient quantities. The submarine blockade was strangling Japan more effectively than any surface campaign could achieve. On June 24, southwest of Kagoshima, Tang's radar detected a massive convoy, 6 large ships shielded by 16 escorts. O'Kane spent 4 hours maneuvering Tang into position, using the submarine's superior surface speed to race ahead of the convoy, then submerging to wait in ambush. As darkness fell, he brought Tang to periscope depth and aligned for a surface attack. The convoy steamed directly toward him in 2 columns. At 2300 hours, O'Kane gave the order to fire. Tang launched 3 torpedoes at the nearest ship in the lead column, then swung her bow and fired 3 more at a second target in the far column. The torpedoes ran hot, straight, and normal. 6 explosions erupted across the convoy. Tang went deep to avoid the escorts, which dropped depth charges in wild patterns nowhere near the submarine's actual location. When Tang returned to periscope depth 30 minutes later, O'Kane expected to see 2 ships sinking. Instead, he witnessed chaos. 4 ships were either burning, sinking, or dead in the water. Post-war, examination of Japanese records revealed what had happened. The 3 torpedoes aimed at the far ship had struck 3 different vessels. The convoy's tight formation meant that the torpedoes, running at 6 feet depth, had found multiple targets. Tamahoko Maru, Tainan Maru, Nasusan Maru, and Kenichi Maru, totaling over 16,000 tons, all went to the bottom that night. It was the most successful single attack by an American submarine in the entire war. 4 ships sunk with 1 torpedo spread. Tang had fired 6 torpedoes and destroyed 4 ships. The mathematics were devastating for Japan. Each of those vessels had taken months to build and carried cargo desperately needed for the war effort. Their loss in minutes demonstrated the stark imbalance between Japanese shipbuilding capacity and American submarine effectiveness. 6 days later, on June 30th, Tang encountered the cargo ship Nikin Maru steaming without escort on the route from Kyushu to Dairen. O'Kane surfaced and gave chase, firing 2 torpedoes that both missed. Nikin Maru's captain, realizing he was under attack, began zigzagging and called for air support. Tang went deep to avoid depth charges from a patrolling aircraft, then surfaced after dark and resumed the chase. For 6 hours, Tang pursued the fleeing freighter across the Yellow Sea. At 0200 hours on July 1st, Tang closed to 750 yards range. O'Kane fired a single torpedo from the aftertubes. The weapon struck Nikin Maru amidships, breaking the ship in half. The cargo vessel sank in less than 3 minutes. Over 3,000 Japanese soldiers went down with her, trapped below decks when the torpedo severed the ship's hull. The loss was catastrophic, an entire regiment eliminated in seconds. The next morning, July 1st, Tang's lookout spotted a tanker and a freighter sailing together. O'Kane maneuvered for attack and fired a spread that sank the freighter Tayun Maru No. 2. The tanker, Takatori Maru No. 1, fled at maximum speed. Tang pursued throughout the day, tracking the tanker as it zigzagged towards safety. After nightfall, O'Kane brought Tang within range and fired 2 torpedoes. Both struck the tanker, which exploded in a massive fireball as its cargo of aviation fuel ignited. The blaze was visible for 20 miles. Tang celebrated Independence Day, July 4th, with a dawn attack on a freighter hugging the coast near shore. O'Kane brought Tang in submerged, but the water was so shallow that the submarine's keel scraped bottom. With rapidly shoaling water threatening to ground Tang, O'Kane backed off, fired a spread of 3 torpedoes with 2 scoring hits, then surfaced as the 6,886-ton cargo ship Asukazan Maru began sinking. Fishing boats rushed to rescue survivors while Tang withdrew to deeper water. Over the next 2 days, Tang sank 2 more cargo ships off Daren, bringing her third patrol total to 10 confirmed sinkings. Japanese records later verified every claim. 10 attacks, 10 ships sunk, 39,161 tons of enemy shipping destroyed. It was the most successful single patrol by any American submarine during World War II. Tang returned to Pearl Harbor on July 14th, having expended all her torpedoes and rewritten the record books. The Navy credited O'Kane and his crew with demonstrating what aggressive, skillful submarine warfare could achieve. Tang had operated in heavily patrolled waters, penetrated convoy escorts, and sunk ships at a rate that terrified the Japanese merchant marine. Convoy captains who survived Tang's attacks reported a ghost submarine that appeared from nowhere, destroyed multiple ships, and vanished before escorts could respond. Japanese naval intelligence, analyzing shipping losses, identified the Yellow Sea as a death trap, but lacked the resources to adequately protect convoys transiting those waters. Tang's 4th War Patrol, conducted from July 31 to September 3, 1944, took her to the most dangerous waters in the Pacific, the coast of Honshu near Tokyo. O'Kane requested this assignment despite knowing that Japanese home waters were heavily patrolled by aircraft, surface vessels, and shore-based radar. The risk was enormous, but so was the opportunity. Shipping routes converged near Tokyo Bay, bringing targets directly to Tang's patrol area. On August 10th, Tang attacked a tanker near Omiyazaki, but missed with all torpedoes due to last-minute maneuvering by the target. The next day, Tang encountered 2 freighters with 2 escorts. O'Kane fired 3 torpedoes at the larger freighter and 2 at the smaller. The larger ship disintegrated, apparently struck in her boilers by a torpedo that caused a catastrophic explosion. As Tang went deep, the crew heard the 4th and 5th torpedoes hit the second ship. A jarring depth charge attack lasted 38 minutes, but Tang survived with only 25, minor damage. On August 14th, Tang engaged a patrol yacht with her 4-inch 50-caliber deck gun, reducing the vessel's superstructure to wreckage with 8 direct hits. 8 days later, she sank a 225-foot patrol boat with gunfire and torpedoes. Tang's 4th patrol demonstrated O'Kane's tactical flexibility. When torpedoes were inappropriate, he used the deck gun. When convoys had too many escorts, he waited for lone ships. When Japanese aircraft forced him deep, he surfaced at night and resumed hunting. The patrol added 6 more ships to Tang's total, though 3 were small patrol craft rather than cargo vessels. By September 1944, Tang had completed 4 war patrols in 9 months. She was credited with sinking 31 ships totaling 227,800 tons, though post-war analysis would revise this to 33 ships, totaling 116,454 tons. Either figure placed Tang first among all American submarines for both number of ships sunk and total tonnage destroyed. O'Kane was the highest-scoring submarine commander in American naval history. His crew was the most decorated and experienced submarine team in the Pacific Fleet. Tang departed Pearl Harbor on September 24, 1944, for her 5th war patrol. O'Kane requested assignment to the Formosa Strait, the narrow waters between Taiwan and mainland China. This was among the most dangerous patrol areas in the Pacific, heavily mined, intensively patrolled, and critical to Japanese supply lines. Commander John Coy, leading a coordinated attack group with submarines Silversides, Trigger, and Salmon, offered O'Kane the option to join the Wolf Pack. O'Kane declined. Tang would operate alone. After refueling at Midway Island on September 27, Tang headed for the Formosa Strait. No further contact was made with any American base after Tang left Midway. Her story would be pieced together later from O'Kane's report and the testimony of survivors. On the night of October 10th to 11th, Tang attacked a Japanese convoy and sank 2 cargo ships, Joshu Go and Oita Maru. The submarine continued patrolling until October 23rd, when radar detected a large convoy consisting of 3 tankers, a transport, a freighter, and numerous escorts. O'Kane planned a night surface attack, one of his favorite tactics. Tang's dark paint and low profile made her nearly invisible in darkness. Her radar gave her eyes that Japanese lookouts lacked. At midnight, Tang broke into the middle of the convoy formation. O'Kane fired torpedoes as he closed on the tankers. 2 torpedoes struck the nearest ship under the stack and engine room. A single torpedo hit the stern of the middle tanker. 2 more exploded under the stack and engine space of the farthest tanker. The first torpedoes began exploding before the last was fired. All hit their targets, which were soon either burning or sinking. As Tang prepared to fire at another tanker crossing her stern, lookouts sighted the transport bearing down in an attempt to ram. O'Kane ordered emergency speed and maneuvered Tang between the transport and a burning tanker. The 2 Japanese ships collided with each other in the confusion. Tang fired 4 stern torpedoes as she escaped, sinking both vessels. The chaos was complete. Ships burning, escorts dropping depth charges randomly, convoys breaking formation in panic. Tang had destroyed the convoy's organization in minutes. Tang resumed patrol near Turnabout Island. On October 24th, at approximately 2100 hours, radar detected another large convoy. As searchlights stabbed the darkness and escorts swept the area, Tang picked her targets. O'Kane launched a series of torpedoes. A destroyer moving to attack exploded, either from one of Tang's torpedoes or friendly fire in the confusion. A transport and a tanker were also sunk. Japanese records would later confirm the destruction of Kogen Maru and Matsumoto Maru, totaling over 13,000 tons. By 02:30 on the morning of October 25, Tang had fired 23 of her 24 torpedoes. O'Kane had 1 weapon left. One more chance to add to the most successful patrol ever made by an American submarine. Tang had been attacking continuously for 2 nights, had survived multiple depth charge attacks, and had sunk 13 ships. The submarine's crew was exhausted but exhilarated. One more shot, then they could head for home, and a hero's welcome. O'Kane identified a final target, a cargo ship attempting to escape the carnage. Tang maneuvered into position. At 02:30, O'Kane gave the order to fire the 24th and final torpedo, a Mark 18 electric weapon. The torpedo ejected from the tube, entering the water smoothly. Then something went catastrophically wrong. The torpedo broached, breaking the surface in a geyser of white water. Instead of running straight toward the target, it curved hard to the left. The crew watched in horror as the torpedo began a circular run, turning back toward Tang. O'Kane ordered emergency speed, attempting to maneuver Tang out of the torpedo's turning circle. For 20 seconds, the submarine raced ahead, propellers thrashing the water. The torpedo continued its arc, homing on the noise of Tang's engines. 20 seconds after launch, the torpedo struck Tang abreast the after-torpedo room, approximately 20 feet from where it had been fired. The explosion was devastating. The warhead contained 575 pounds of Torpex explosive, far more powerful than TNT. The blast severed Tang's stern, flooding 3 compartments instantly. Men as far forward as the control room received broken limbs from the concussion. The submarine's stern sank immediately, dragging the rest of the hull down. 9 officers and men were on the bridge when the torpedo struck. O'Kane, thrown clear by the explosion, found himself in the water. Boatswain's mate first class William Leibold and radioman first class Floyd Caverley also reached the surface. One officer escaped from the flooded conning tower without using the escape trunk, a feat considered nearly impossible. Lieutenant Commander Lawrence Savadkin, the engineering officer, somehow swam clear and survived. Tang hit bottom at 180 feet depth. Inside the forward torpedo room, 30 survivors crowded into the space, intending to use the forward escape trunk. They had been trained in escape procedures using the Momsen lung, a breathing device designed for submarine escapes. In all of submarine warfare history, the Momsen lung had never been successfully used to escape from a sunken submarine in combat conditions. Tang's crew was about to attempt what everyone believed was impossible. The escape trunk could accommodate 8 men at a time. Water pressure at 180 feet created crushing force. Survivors had to flood the trunk, equalize pressure, open the outer hatch, and ascend slowly while breathing from the Momsen lung. Ascending too fast would cause the bends, nitrogen bubbles forming in blood and tissue, causing paralysis or death. Panic would be fatal. Discipline was everything. 13 men attempted escape. 8 drowned in the trunk or during ascent. 5 reached the surface alive. Torpedoman 3rd Class Pete Narawansky, Torpedoman 2nd Class Hayes Trucker, Motor Machinist's Mate 2nd Class Jesse De Silva, Motor Machinist's Mate 3rd Class Clayton Decker, and Lieutenant Junior Grade Henry Flanagan fought their way to the surface and survived 8 hours in the water before rescue. At dawn, a Japanese destroyer escort picked up the 9 survivors. The same ship carried burned and wounded survivors from ships Tang had sunk hours earlier. When these survivors saw the American submariners, they inflicted brutal beatings and torture. O'Kane would later write with remarkable humanity that when his crew realized their clubbings and kickings were being administered by the burned, mutilated survivors of their own attacks, they found they could take it with less prejudice. The 9 survivors, O'Kane, Leibold, Caverley, Savadkin, Narawansky, Trucker, De Silva, Decker, and Flanagan, were transported to Japan and imprisoned. They were first held at the Ofuna Navy Detention Center, then moved to the Omori prisoner of war camp. Their treatment was harsh, but they survived. 78 members of Tang's crew died when the submarine went down. They remain aboard Tang, which still lies on the bottom of the Formosa Strait in Chinese territorial waters. The loss of Tang by her own torpedo, the last one fired on the most successful patrol ever made by an American submarine, was a stroke of singular misfortune. She was credited with sinking 13 vessels, totaling 107,324 tons on her, the final patrol alone. Overall, Tang sank 33 confirmed ships totaling 116,454 tons in just 5 patrols, spanning 9 months. No other American submarine achieved comparable success in such a short combat career. When the war ended in August 1945, the 9 survivors were liberated from Japanese prison camps and returned to the United States. O'Kane was immediately nominated for the Medal of Honor. On March 27, 1946, President Harry Truman presented O'Kane with the nation's highest military decoration in ceremonies on the White House lawn. The citation praised O'Kane's conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity during Tang's final 2 attacks on October 23 and 24, 1944. O'Kane also received 3 Navy Crosses, 3 Silver Stars, and the Legion of Merit with V Device for Valor. He continued serving in the Navy after the war, commanding submarine tenders, testifying at Japanese war crimes trials, and serving as Commander Submarine Division 32. He retired as a Rear Admiral in 1957. O'Kane died on February 16, 1994, at age 82. He remains the highest-scoring submarine commander in American naval history. Tang received 4 battle stars and 2 Presidential Unit citations for World War II service. The submarine's loss was officially recorded on February 8, 1945, when she was struck from the Naval Register. In 1985, on the 40th anniversary of the war's end, surviving crew members held a reunion. 5 of the 9 survivors were still alive. They gathered to remember 78 shipmates who had died when Tang went down, and to honor a submarine that had achieved what many considered impossible. The Japanese Navy's response to Tang's devastating attacks revealed fundamental flaws in their anti-submarine warfare doctrine. Japan, an island nation dependent on shipping just like Great Britain, should have devoted enormous resources to protecting merchant convoys. Instead, the Imperial Japanese Navy remained obsessed with offensive operations and battleship combat. The Grand Escort Command, Japan's belated attempt to organize convoy protection, was not established until November 1943, more than 2 years into the war. Even then, it received obsolete ships, poorly trained personnel, and inadequate resources. By 1944, American submarines were sinking Japanese merchant ships at a rate of approximately 250,000 gross tons per month. In that year alone, 603 Japanese merchant ships totaling 2.7 million tons fell victim to American submarines. Japanese commodity imports plunged from 16.4 million tons to 10 million tons. The war against shipping, according to the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, was perhaps the most decisive single factor in the collapse of the Japanese economy and the logistic support of Japanese military and naval power. Tang's record was part of a broader submarine campaign that strangled Japan. Of the 4 million tons of Japanese merchant shipping lost during the war, American submarines accounted for 56%. They also sank 201 Japanese warships, including 1 battleship, 8 aircraft carriers, and 11 cruisers. This was achieved by a submarine force that never exceeded 50,000 officers and enlisted men, only 16,000 of whom served at sea. The submarine service represented just 1.6% of the United States Navy, but inflicted disproportionate damage on Japan's ability to wage war. The parallels between Tang's story and the broader American submarine campaign are striking. Both demonstrated that technological superiority, aggressive tactics, and skilled personnel could achieve devastating results. The Mark 18 electric torpedo that sank Tang was the same weapon that made her attacks so effective. American submarines by 1944 possessed working torpedoes, reliable radar, effective sonar, and commanders trained in aggressive tactics. Japanese anti-submarine forces lacked equivalent technology and doctrine. The result was a massacre. Tang's third patrol, sinking 10 ships in 36 days, demonstrated what American submarines could achieve when everything worked correctly. The fifth patrol, sinking 13 ships before being destroyed by a malfunctioning torpedo, revealed both the heights of success and the cruel randomness of combat. O'Kane and his crew had pushed submarine warfare to its limits, achieving results that seemed impossible when the war began. Post-war analysis revealed that Tang's confirmed total of 33 ships sunk placed her first on the list of most successful American submarines for both number of ships and total tonnage. USS Tautog was credited with 26 ships, but lower tonnage. USS Flasher achieved higher tonnage but fewer ships. Tang held both records. O'Kane's total of 33 ships across 5 patrols gave him the highest count of any submarine commander. His average of 1 ship sunk for every 10 days on patrol was unmatched. The story of Tang is ultimately a story of exceptional men doing exceptional things under extraordinary pressure. O'Kane's tactical innovations, his crew's training and discipline, their aggressive execution of attacks, and their courage under depth charging all combined to create the most successful submarine in American naval history. The tragic ending, destroyed by their own weapon at the moment of greatest triumph, adds a dimension of cruel irony to their achievement. Tang's crew knew they were the best. They trained harder, fought more aggressively, and took greater risks than almost any other submarine crew. They paid the ultimate price when 78 men died in the sinking. But in 9 months of combat, they achieved what would take other submarines years to accomplish. They demonstrated that submarine warfare, when conducted with skill and audacity, could inflict strategic damage far beyond the submarine's size or cost. The Japanese merchant marine never recovered from the devastation inflicted by submarines like Tang. By 1945, Japan's shipping lanes were graveyards. Merchant captains refused to sail without massive escorts. Convoy routes were abandoned as too dangerous. Critical raw materials remained in conquered territories because there were no ships to transport them. Japan's war economy collapsed, not from bombing raids but from strangulation, the slow choking of supply lines by submarines operating thousands of miles from American bases. Tang's legacy extends beyond her combat record. She proved that American submarine design was superior, that American torpedo technology had finally worked, and that American submarine commanders could execute complex attacks with devastating effectiveness. The Balao-class submarines, of which Tang was one, became the template for post-war American submarine development. The tactics O'Kane pioneered, night surface attacks and aggressive convoy penetration, became doctrine taught at submarine school. His emphasis on crew training and periscope drill became standard practice. In 1963, the Navy commissioned a new submarine, USS Tang SS-563, named in honor of the World War II boat. This Tang served until 1980, carrying the name and legacy of O'Kane's command. Today, guided missile destroyer USS O'Kane DDG-77 continues the tradition, named for the Medal of Honor recipient who demonstrated what courage, skill, and determination could achieve. The submarine warfare campaign in the Pacific remains one of the least publicized but most decisive operations of World War II. Unlike dramatic carrier battles or amphibious invasions, submarine operations occurred in silence and secrecy. Boats departed on patrol and either returned or didn't. Successes were classified, losses were mourned quietly, and the strategic impact was understood only after the war ended. Yet the numbers tell the story. American submarines destroyed over half of Japan's merchant fleet and a significant portion of her navy, achieving this with a tiny fraction of overall naval personnel. Tang's story within this larger campaign stands out for the concentration of success in such a brief period. 9 months, 5 patrols, 33 ships destroyed, 78 men lost, 9 survivors, 1 Medal of Honor. The mathematics are brutal and extraordinary in equal measure. Tang compressed into 9 months what most submarines took years to achieve, and paid for that success with the highest casualty rate among successful American submarines. The circular run that destroyed Tang was not unique. USS Tullabee was sunk by her own torpedo on March 26, 1944, becoming the first American submarine lost to this cause. Other submarines experienced circular runs, but escaped destruction. The Mark 18 electric torpedo, despite being superior to earlier weapons, still suffered occasional guidance failures. The gyroscope that controlled direction could malfunction. The propeller could be damaged during launch. External factors like currents could affect trajectory. At the moment Tang launched her 24th torpedo, all the skill and courage in the world could not overcome a mechanical failure that sent the weapon back toward its source. That 9 men survived at all was miraculous. 5 men escaped from inside the sunken submarine using Momsen lungs, accomplishing what submarine training manuals considered nearly impossible. 4 men, including O'Kane, survived in the water for 8 hours after being thrown from the bridge or escaping the conning tower, demonstrating extraordinary endurance. All 9 endured brutal treatment from Japanese survivors and imprisonment for 10 months, showing resilience that matched their combat courage. O'Kane's post-war career, rising to Rear Admiral and serving the Navy for 13 more years, proved that surviving Tang's loss did not diminish his capability or determination. The reunions held by Tang's survivors became emotional gatherings where 9 men remembered 78 shipmates. They spoke of the men who died in the after compartments when the torpedo struck, unable to escape before those spaces flooded. They remembered the men who died attempting escape from the forward torpedo room, succumbing to pressure, drowning, or the bends during ascent. They honored the men who had crewed Tang through 5 patrols, achieving the impossible and paying the ultimate price. In the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, an interactive exhibit called Final Mission allows visitors to experience Tang's last patrol. Participants enter a simulated submarine, receive cards corresponding to actual crew members, and are assigned stations. The events of October 24 to 25, 1944, unfold on overhead screens while visitors perform tasks. The circular run of the 24th torpedo is depicted. Upon exiting, visitors see a wall with photographs of the crew and learn whether the sailor associated with their card survived. It is a powerful reminder that behind the statistics and tactics were real men who faced death in the dark depths. Tang's combat record remains unmatched. 33 ships confirmed sunk in 5 patrols. Third patrol, 10 ships in 36 days. Fifth patrol, 13 ships before being destroyed. Overall average, 1 ship every 10 days on patrol. These numbers represent not just destruction but disruption of Japan's entire war effort. Each ship carried troops, equipment, raw materials, or food. Each sinking meant Japanese soldiers without ammunition, factories without raw materials, civilians without food. Multiply Tang's success by the hundreds of American submarines conducting similar patrols, and the strategic impact becomes clear. Japan was strangled by submarines operating in silent isolation across the Pacific. The loss of Tang by her own torpedo adds tragic irony to this achievement. After sinking more ships than any other American submarine, after conducting the most successful patrol in submarine warfare history, after demonstrating what skilled submariners could accomplish, Tang was destroyed by the very weapon that made her so deadly. The crew's final moment was not defeat in combat but victim of mechanical failure, a random malfunction at the worst possible moment. O'Kane's Medal of Honor citation emphasizes his actions during the final 2 attacks, but the award really honors 5 patrols of sustained aggressive combat. It recognizes tactical innovations that changed submarine warfare. It acknowledges crew training that produced the most effective submarine team in the Pacific. It memorializes 78 men who died when Tang went down, and it celebrates survival, the 9 men who lived through what should have killed them all. The Japanese convoy survivors who beat Tang's crew after rescue demonstrated how effective the submarine had been. Their fury came from watching ships destroyed, comrades killed, and the seeming invincibility of an enemy who appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating effect, and vanished. That American submariners could inflict such damage and then survive their own submarine's sinking must have seemed incomprehensible to survivors who had watched Tang operate with apparent immunity throughout the attacks. Tang's final resting place in the Formosa Strait remains undisturbed. Chinese territorial waters prevent exploration. The submarine lies in 180 feet of water, her stern section separated from the hull by the torpedo explosion, her forward compartments containing the remains of men who died, attempting escape. It is a war grave, protected by international convention and practical inaccessibility. Tang's crew remains aboard their submarine, forever on patrol in the waters where they achieved their greatest success and met their tragic end. The submarine service erected no grand monuments to Tang. There are no massive memorials listing the 33 ships destroyed. The story is preserved in official records, O'Kane's books about Wahoo and Tang, survivor accounts, and the memories of families who lost fathers, brothers, and sons. The Navy honored Tang by naming 2 subsequent vessels after her, ensuring the name continues in active service. That is the submariner's memorial, not stone and bronze, but steel and purpose, carrying the legacy forward through continued service. Tang's story demonstrates that in war, success and tragedy often intertwine. The most successful submarine met the most ironic fate. The highest-scoring commander survived to receive the Medal of Honor while 78 of his crew died. The submarine that revolutionized tactics was destroyed by the weapon that made those tactics possible. These contradictions cannot be resolved, only acknowledged as part of war's cruel randomness. What Tang proved beyond doubt was that American submarines in 1944 had evolved into strategic weapons capable of decisive impact. The boats were reliable, the torpedoes worked, the tactics were proven, and the commanders were aggressive. Tang concentrated all these factors into 9 months of nearly perfect execution, marred only by the mechanical failure that ended her career. In those 9 months, she sank enough shipping to affect Japan's entire war economy, destroyed enough enemy vessels to panic the merchant marine, and demonstrated enough tactical skill to change submarine warfare doctrine. The crew of USS Tang, both the 78 who died and the 9 who survived, achieved something extraordinary. They took a submarine and crew to the absolute limits of performance, maintaining that level through 5 consecutive patrols and producing results that remain unmatched 7 decades later. Their legacy is not just numbers and tactics, but proof of what exceptional men can accomplish when training, technology, and courage combine in pursuit of a clear objective. They were the best submarine crew of World War II, and Tang was the best submarine. That their story ends in tragedy does not diminish their achievement. It adds a final chapter that reminds us that even the best sometimes fall victim to the randomness and cruelty of war.